Hello everyone, good afternoon and good morning for some, and welcome to today's Technology Talk session. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Marie Correcla, AIRAH's Engagement and Event Executive. Just before we get the session started, as always, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we will meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So today's technology talk is on indoor air quality monitoring and visualization in practice. And the session today is presented to you by IAQ Ventilation. As always, if you've got any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A box to type any questions in that you may have. And we'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible at the conclusion of the presentation. So I'd now like to introduce to you our presenter for today, Evie Sims, who's the founder of Bulks Holdings. So Evie, I'll now pass things over to you and you can get the session underway for us.
Welcome everyone to the Indoor Air Quality Monitoring and Visualization in Practice webinar. I just want to talk a little bit about myself. I am the co-founder of Bulks Holdings, which is the trading company for IAQ Ventilation. You can find a little bit more about us on our webpage. So what have I been doing in the last 23 years in the indoor air quality space? I've together with a bunch of cohorts, have founded the Indoor Air Quality chapter in Australia. I was one of the first directors on the association. My passion also exceeds to the point that I put myself up for the board of directors and was in 2022 was nominated into the board of directors for the IAQ Indoor Air Quality Association International. So where did I come from? I come from restoration contracting from microbial and chemical contaminants in buildings, ventilation management, moisture control technologies. I work with a whole bunch of stakeholders to actually help them with their indoor air quality problems and questions. And with that, we're co-founded in 2021, the Healthy Indoor magazine, which focuses on indoor pollutants and contaminants in building, mainly in Australia, but the magazine is well received overseas. We have a lot of local contributors, which is really good to see. I also sit in a lot of certification writing committee and STG group. So why have I talked a little bit more about myself? The main reason is that because with that is that when we founded Bulks Holdings, we really wanted to really bring into understanding of what how we can use indoor air quality sensors, how we can really be able to help stakeholders to really understand how to understand what contaminants are in their buildings. And then, of course, COVID hit. During that time, we've developed the Healthy Building Scorecard. I'd like to talk a little bit about that before I go back to the sensor part, because you'll understand as I'm explaining the scorecard and how it actually relates to especially a lot of our AIRAH members who works in facility management and or mechanical contractors themselves. So the intentions of and the vision of the building scorecard was to have as a free assessment tools where we can see occupants. We can use that assessment tools. Any mechanical contractors or building facility managements and stakeholders can use this assessment tools and look at how the indoor air quality matters is happening in their buildings. It also automatically networks the stakeholders, makes that conversation a little bit easier to start with. Provides a benchmark to enable you to demonstrate the practice driven by continuous improvement on the building site that you're managing. By planning ahead, you could also create a pathway to gain local and international certifications. We'll talk a little bit more about why these certifications are, are something that we talk about over and over throughout this presentation. And these certifications could be WELS buildings, LEEDs, Fitwells, Green Star, and of course our own neighbours rating in Australia. So the focus is of course on healthy building performance. So most performance instruments starts with energy efficiency in Australia, such as neighbours rating, or indoor environments or IEQs, like LEEDs, Fitwells, and green building. And of course, Green Star neighbours, again, would be energy and indoor environmental focus, lights, sound, you know, your 6 parameters, PM 2.5, temperature, humidity, etc. And all WELS buildings will mainly focus on 4 predominant out of that 9 pathways that they have. And of course, temperature, humidity, VOC, and CO2 is one of the main, target area. Focus is more on indoor air quality management, especially since the pandemic. For us, we look at, how these measurements includes carbon dioxide for ventilation, tracer gas for airflow, DNA aerosols for pathogens, transmissions, E. coli for sewage contaminants, dampness in buildings, and for mold. And these are all relevant to condensations, and also all the rains that we've had in the last couple of years is going to be with the climate issues that we have to be aware of. So these are some of the slides that my friend and I, Dr. Claire Bird, helped us to. Slide seems to have lost the point here, but I'll try and get through it bear with me for just half a second. I'll continue first. So the international trends in indoor air quality, the challenges, opportunities. So we know they're driven by control of our health, the wellness, which is worth quite a few $1 billion, organic food industry, growth, fitness, and the increase of health costs and well-beings that we have.
Evie, sorry, just Marie here. We've just lost your slideshow. Can you just reshare that one for us?
My apologies. It seemed to have. Can you see this now?
It seems to be your screen's just really zoomed in.
Bear with me for a second.
Can you just close it and maybe just yeah, that's better. Just pick the slide that you were up to, and then. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Evie.
Sorry, my apologies. Technologies. So the demand for healthy building associated with wellness trend is important. Demand that we are fear of being sick is important. People link illness, not lack of wellness, to their buildings. So understanding these trends is very important for us as building facilities service provider. So the indoor air quality, which is, and I'm expecting that we had this huge change a few years ago because due to COVID, is the contaminant becomes pollutants when they are present at a sufficient high concentrate to cause an adverse outcome to health or to the environment within the period of time that the human or environment is subject to the exposure to the contaminant site. So we are learning a lot more about contaminants, how it affects, what the public opinions are, and and what the public opinion may know, and what we need as building facility service provider need to actually help to make sure that the indoor air quality in that building is actually acknowledged to the people that's coming in. And of course, the individual is one of the main bringers to a building. If you go into a building, you have to understand your shoes brings in, if you stepped over feces, your shoes will bring in this contaminants in. If you had a water damage building in your building, you may bring in these micro particulates into the building. And these can affect the building in itself. Of course, the shift has changed. You know, the pre-pandemics, we're looking in gaseous pollutant indoors, microbial, Legionnaire sewage, greenhouse gas, and potential outbreak disease. The start of the pandemics, we're looking at surface spread and near spread. Then we looked at airborne transmission, which raised a key probability. Then the shift came when the expert looked at and then gave the reasons we all know, and then you've got the post-pandemic say. Now we're focusing at exposure, realizing that ventilations and removing filtrations of pathogens is really important. We need to understand, fast solutions to, to control infectious controls, and we are looking at deploying more and more sensors in the building. So in the past, we have these different type of languages, social distance. In 2019, we learned these new words: that social distance, airborne transmission, pathogens, variants, RAP tests, PN 2.5 and 9. But we failed to talk about, how the infection spread, what is important, how is it translated to the ventilation practices and such. So the whole bunch of experts joined in, and the independent SAGE, the Canadian Aerosol Transmission, IBAC, AMAC, AIRAH, etc. So we looked at creating what was the current motivations for healthier building. So Fitwel had their Fitwel motivation is tenant satisfaction, market differentials, COVID, and human health effects. Now, building owners are now being asked to be responsible for air quality. The majority of building investors in Australia is looking to now have building certifications in place. Not all, but there's more and more of it. And these certifications would be Fitwel's, WELS, predominantly WELS in Australia. Hey. From the outset, managing IAQ can be a daunting and complex task if you're unsure. Let's face it, IAQ management activity starts with concerns and forms a person not within the IAQ professionals. Whether it be a single office or a floor office within a building, a group of buildings, or standalone facilities, as it is important, we manage it critical. It is critical to manage the indoor air environment for and our occupants. So we inhale 1,000 liters of air in 24 hours. We spend about 80% of our time in indoor environments. So is our space clean and safe? We don't know that. We can't just go and say, it's safe, eh? So if you're a tenant and you're concerned about infectious control and IAQ, or have an odor problem or mold or water damage, the FM is asked to look at these problems. The building owners are asked to spend the money. The service provider is asking for more money so that they can fix the problem, and then makes a whole interesting conundrums for a whole bunch of stakeholders. So the healthy building scorecards predominant focus is the life cycle of air. The life cycle of air really depicts the whole indoor environments, gives you defined goals, lets you understand and measure the indoor air quality of a building. Then you can say, yes, let's improve some ventilation or not. There's a huge condensation issues due to thermal breaks from your windows or condensation like my office that has due to an air conditioning issues, or the HVAC could be optimized a little bit. What is your cleaning and hygiene program for your building? Do we need more filters? Do we need standalone? Do we need HEPA 13 on our buildings, or do we just deploy some air filtration units when it's necessary and such like that, or control? So this whole life cycle gives you a good benchmark to go and talk to everyone and say, let's work this out and see what this really means to us. Hey? So on that note, we will talk about the global trends in IAQ, because now that we said, okay, we understand why we're using these monitors. Right? Why does everybody need an indoor air quality sensor? Why is it that we need this? Are we just there because it is what post-pandemic requires, that everybody just have a sensor, and that have a temperature, humidity, CO2 sensor, and that would be fine? Hey, yes and no. Hey, the sensors do really give you information. Sensors gives you in the past is that the sensors really just look at temperature, humidity, and CO2. Now with a lot of sustainable and different wellness certifications that comes in, we know that there are not only temperature that we need to monitor, we need to look at also temperature and humidity. Sensors are even more, they've expanded to look at VOC, they look at particulates in different size. We know that viruses is less than 1 microns, soot, carbon emissions, fire infiltrations, 2.5 PM. If we're looking at respiratories to health and building, we're looking at probably 4 microns. And if we're looking at clean rooms, the standard is 5 microns that these type of sensors have, right? So we also look at different type of sensors also have different size and values. They are a little bit more expensive, and the cost varies tremendously for the need that is required by the building. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So general low cost sensors is available at the moment, and there's lots of them. So in the past is that, before the pandemic, everybody's like, for me to talk about sensors to a lot of people is that it was a hard topic. I had to explain over and over what an indoor air quality sensors really actually does, especially if the area had is sustainable to humidity exposure in that environment. Nowadays, we don't, because there's just a lot of different sensors. Having a sensor is better than not having a sensor in a sense. However, if you do not have the right sensor in a building and the sensor can drift because of hot and cold, and the sensors are not calibrated or does not have the ability to calibrate through the algorithms, then the sensors may only be as such a equipment that may only look at temperature and humidity, or may look at some sort of carbon dioxide and the drift of all the others like VOC, formaldehyde, and such would only be a value that is too far to really actually understand. Hey. So for us is that we've looked at a whole bunch of different sensors, and we really like the YuHu Aura sensor. The YuHu sensors have been used in the New Zealand University. The smart sensor has been used for a lot of testing when they were doing tests in the buildings to look at after the earthquake, when they're looking at buildings that are moving to see what, especially at that time, the smart sensors was the only sensor that really actually has a pressure differential that was in there. So what is the YuHu Aura sensor? Hey, it is, you'll be able to see the invisible. The Aura is a best class commercial environmental sensors, we think, that is used in real-time data and actionable insight. It has 13 plus key indoor environmental quality parameters. It is plug and play. It's easy to get your YuHu system up and running to various powers, and it's easy to install and connects whichever options that you like. So you can set it up in the dashboard what you like it to be. It is wall mounted and can be integrated to your BMS system so that you can actually use it as an on-demand type of system. So the system has temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. So the dust particulates is what we talked about is 2.5, 1 dust particulate 4 microns and 10 microns. It has VOC, formaldehyde air pressure, virus index is something that YuHu has developed. It's taken the international standards from all over the world and used it into their matrix so that you can actually see through that algorithm how really well your building is performing when you have set up from what we're talking from the life cycle of air is that you have mitigated the problems or have cleaned your building, and this will give you and your tenants a really good visual of how your building is working, especially when it's green. If it's yellow, then you'll know there may be some pollutants, and when it's red, it means that it could be, it could be a movement. That's why we say that we put it up, because fluctuant issues can be a problem to any sensors. That is. The other thing that YuHu sensor has is the light and sound parameters that fits into Neighbors protocol. So the dashboards, as many, not just the YuHu sensors, many sensors are now beginning to have a centralizations dashboard. So the difference with the YuHu sensors is that they use the algorithms to actually calibrate the sensor as it goes, so that you have a 7-day calibrations without having the sensors to drift. And should any of the sensors drift to a certain to a parameters that is out of that algorithm, then you'll know, and it will point us to come back to change that unit over to sensors that work. So you can customize your dashboards. You can share the dashboards with your clients. So if you have it in a facility, you can use it in they can attach it to the building management systems. You can oversee the way that it's working. If the humidity is high and you realize that there's a burst water system somewhere, you'll be able to advise your facilities management that something has happened. It will flash on your phone, on your iPad, or on your dashboard. If you're looking at a small commercial buildings, these small commercial buildings can use it in their foyer so that people can visually see that they have a very clean building. They care about the occupants and their staff in the building, and also anyone that comes in, and they can always see that we're installing one in our Queensland office because the office is just new, and we have them on our dashboards so that people will know how much we look after the building, not just because it's important to them, it's actually more important to my staff and me than anybody else. You can manage your dashboard in various locations. You can have a lot of them in one locations or not. You can track the air quality data and the trends, and you can go alert and response immediately. So from all these different types of indoor air quality sensors, there are many different types of sensors that are available at the moment. You can have on-demand sensors that only looks at carbon dioxide, which I'm quite, most of the AIRAH members may be very familiar with them. If you're not, on-demand systems is just basically you set up your parameters. If it's 800 parts per million that you want from your CO2, your sensors will then, if it goes over 800, it'll turn your damper on, and you can have fresh air input so they can mix the air, and then it doesn't get so stagnant. So that's one. The other stuff, the other type of indoor air quality sensors that you can have is a full communication dashboard, like the AIRAH sensors. You can also have temperature humidity sensors within your ductwork. Haven has a system that we use in our office in Melbourne, because the system does not have intake air, and we have huge windows that the sun heats directly every day during summer. So the building sweats, and we had to put in our own ERV systems in the ceiling so that it can take in and work through the Haven system. The Haven will look at pressure difference, temperature, and humidity. You have it on your iPhone, it will go high, and you can see that my system will switch on, again, bringing in fresh air and, lowering some of that temperature in that room, because I have a lot of, leather training chairs, which are leather, or so-called leather training chairs. So what else? What other systems are there? There are other systems that are available now that has visualized camera capability that are placed into your ductwork. These looks at working so basically is that if we look at the indoor space, of which most of the indoor air quality sensors is that it looks at people, cleaning chemicals, or people that brings in perfumes and pollutants that comes in, mold affected, water damage affected materials, and all sweatings and stuff that we have, condensations that we have in the indoor space. However, we don't have a lot of stuff that shows the ductwork and show you what's happening in the ductwork, unless you go to clean or you put a robot into the ductwork and shows how your ductwork is. This one is another type of systems that you can actually place into your ductwork, and then it will have the ability to look through a 360 degrees movement to look at the cleanliness, the PM 2.5s, look at, again, the microbial content, if the mold growth is there due to condensations and such, filter status, your coil, and indoor air quality, which we've been talking about, filtration and maintenance. So again, it goes through the 8 cycles of the in situ space of an air conditioning system, as the life cycle of air looks at the inside the working space of a system. So all in all is that the IAQ trends have a lot of really good potentials in the market. It is really important, I believe, that we really consider adding indoor air quality sensors, low cost, high cost, or reliable sensors into a building space, it is at least one point of contact that you can look at some of the parameters and issues that you might have in your building. In the next, I think that, so where do we go from here? There's more to go. So today's topic, I would like to stop from here and probably would like to pick it up in more webinars to come that will look at the advantages and disadvantages of indoor air quality sensors.
We're actually getting some questions coming through as well. One of them is there any certification required in Australia for using an indoor air quality instrument?
There's no certification around the world at the moment, as I know, apart from, I think that there are a couple of countries that are trying to establish that. The ASTM Indoor Air Quality Working Group for sensors and calibrations should, at some point end of this year, have at least a guideline towards the sensors indication, because we have a lot of range at the moment, and some of the ranges that are, like we're talking about, low cost monitoring sensors may or may not have the capability to really do what they really say that they are doing. So I foresee that we will. I know for a fact is that in Lydia Morosky's Australian Ventilation and Technology research group, which Baux is part of, will be focusing a lot on sensors and what and how that means. And we will be looking at a lot of standards, should there be, and incorporate that into that knowledge platform. Right?
Thanks, Evie. And just on the question that you asked before, we've actually got a comment come through from Bryce Anderson, who's actually saying we need a 24 VAC sensors, and that is the power supply available from the BMS, and we need a BACnet protocol, as that is widely available across the floors.
Yes. Was that a question? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, it was a comment from Bryce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for building, Bryce is right. So if you're looking at sensors that wants to communicate to big buildings, and a lot of them concentrate on BACnet. Some of them don't have Modbus yet. But for Australia, we have BACnet, Modbus, and predominantly these two. So when you're looking at for your building, you have to look at three things. Like for me, I think it's three things. One is that do they have BACnet or Modbus that fits into your building facilities ability? Second is that how is there a possibility of just connecting it through the Ethernet possibility, which is really hard. The third is that will your building have the capability of doing APIs? So most of these systems have APIs. However, API integration is not something that a lot of building is willing to get into, even though they are much easier than what they used to be. So for YooHoo, they have API integration at the moment. And if I believe BACnet is available, but not Modbus, just to give you an example.
Thanks, Evie. Another question we've got here from Ben is there a standard or industry agreed list of limits for each IAQ measured parameter, CO2, yes, etc.? Yep.
Yeah. So Australia, if you go into the EPA in Australia, there is standard. The international WHOs also have standard, and your own sustainable certification. Let's try that. Have their own standard. So if you're looking at wells, the parameters for I think the parameters for CO2 is 800, et cetera. So they have their own parameters that they like. So if you want, feel free to get in touch with AIRAH. I can get you some of those links and send that through to you. A couple of the links that you want for those standards. Easy.
Thanks, Evie. Another question here is, what is the most commonly used instrument for once-off IAQ test?
Too many parameters. What are your parameters that you're looking at? Temperature, humidity, CO2. IAQ tests is the reason why we don't have a big we don't have an overall indoor air quality standard is because the parameters are so big. So if you most people do indoor, most people do temperature, humidity, CO2, and TVOC. So those are the 4 most commonly used units. But even wells have up their parameters threshold from 4 to now 6, I believe, or 9. I'm not quite sure if I answer that question, because I'm not exactly sure what the question was heading to. So I apologize if I didn't.
Sure. Next one here is indoor air quality something that may be implemented into a spec to achieve conditions to meet a future standard, i.e. neighbours rating?
I think that's already neighbours, all the certifications that has come through, like neighbours and wells. They have tested over and over and over again to really achieve, especially now Wells is like 2.2 version of it. So they have gone through their certification program and said that, you know what, this is better. This is better than what it was before. So let's use this parameters. Let's use this to make sure that we can look at the comfort, the health and well-being of the occupants, make sure that the ventilation system is going to be, we're not falling asleep when the occupant's working. They have a bit of place walk around in, neighbors looking at, the lights and the sound, because some people are very sound prone and the light can really mess up someone. So there are some parameters already inbuilt within some certifications. There are some indoor components that mix, mash, and stuff. And that's why the Healthy Building Scorecard, especially life cycle of air, you will find that there is some basic parameters there. We are now going to the second step of the Healthy Building Scorecard, is that we're starting to build the matrix of it. With the matrix, we'll have international standards and standards that will actually help you. Again, it's a free assessment tools. The whole idea is to get people to start this conversation of indoor air quality and what does it mean and how does it work on. Then the last thing to answer that question is that AIRAH has a indoor air quality strategic working group. In that working group is that they are now developing some basic, work towards the framework of what indoor air quality would really look like in Australian environment. And hopefully we'll get something soon from there. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to get into contact with the strategic working group, because they might be able to take some of that information and work on as the group is talking. Start with Benjamin. With the Yoo-Hoo sensor, is this a single device with multiple sensors? Yes. So we have 13 sensors within the unit itself. And because of the virus index, it can take all that information through the building and through the algorithm through the dashboards, provides you with a virus index that you can have a look, or you can set the parameters to the standards that you want in that particular building. If the building you have established with either your indoor air quality professionals or the building management or the building owners to say that the threshold, we want to not go to the 800, I want to go to my CO2 to be 1,000, and that's acceptable, then those type of stuff can be adjusted within the system itself, right? If so, how do you determine the location of the sensor that best represented the environment? You need to, in a building, you need to have every 100 meters square, you need to have another sensor, because the multitude of the sensors can actually help you to actually understand that. And that's sensors for anything that you're doing. It's having one sensors only indicates that specific area that you're dealing with, and it doesn't tell you the overall picture. This may be too detailed, but how do you deal with automatic auto calibration of CO2? So some sensors have the auto calibration that resets themselves based on assumption that at some point the building will be empty and the sensor will reset at 440 parts per million. In some building, the reset point has never reached, so the sensor values ends up being false and the sensor is incorrect. Are you familiar with these issues? Sometimes this depends on what sensor you use. So if you're looking at sensors that have a dashboard and algorithm, AIRAH has, YooHoo has that. So does a couple of other sensors that we sell. We only sell the sensors that can actually auto calibrate if there is going to be an problem with the trigger point. Say, if you're looking at on-demand sensors like the units that we have in Tel Air, it can do that. However, you will find that it may need manual reset on it, and that's why some of the sensors you still use analog system. They are a little bit easier to not go into faults. The digital systems can play up a little bit, and as I've been told by our manufacturer, I went to Protometer's factory just a couple of months ago and learned a lot about temperature and humidity and CO2 sensors there. So that's as far as I know, Brad. I think it would be quite interesting if you don't mind. Please do send me an email. I actually can talk to you after this, please, after the meeting.
Thanks, Evie. I think Brad's also just sent another comment in there saying the sensors is talking about usually the standalone ones. But yeah, maybe it's best, Brad, to reach out to Evie directly to discuss that further. I think that's all the questions that have seemed to come through there, Evie.
Yep.
So just might as well start wrapping up the session, everyone. But of course, please feel free to contact either myself or Evie directly should you want to discuss anything further. As always, just want to thank everyone who registered and attended today's session, and a special thanks to Evie for conducting today's presentation as well. The recording of today's webinar will be made available for public viewing, and I will send an email out as soon as that does come available for you. If you are interested in presenting at an AIRAH Technology Talk session or Streamline webinar, please don't hesitate to get in contact with me. And of course, feel free to check out our website for our next upcoming sessions. So until next time, take care. Thank you once again, Evie. And I look forward to you joining us at another AIRAH webinar soon.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.